Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Well, what happens in the event of a disaster? If a disaster or a natural catastrophe happens, there is a sudden disruption. We could not able to continue our normal life. Particularly, first thing, our movement is arrested. Locomotion is stopped. Communication is totally damaged. So it causes a damage to the property as well as to the lives. So the normal social and economic mechanisms becomes inadequate to come into or to restore the normalcy. So keeping all these things, so a disaster can create a complete disruption in our normal social life. Another important statement to be understood is India is a disaster prone country. So that is a point to be noted. How we can say that India is a disaster prone country? The statistics clearly says that 57% of the land is vulnerable to earthquakes. 12% is vulnerable to severe earthquakes. And if you say earthquakes or other thing, it is basically due to the tectonic movement or the arrangement of the plates. And 68% of the land is vulnerable to drought. In the sense, we have discussed very many factors responsible for drought, very particularly the climate change and the uneven distribution of the rain and deforestation activity. Interestingly, 12% of the land is vulnerable to floods. We can say that 20% of the land is vulnerable to cyclones and floods because our coastal arrangement is like that. We have got a good marine environment and we have got three seas: Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea. So that way we have got a good aquatic wealth. In the other hand, the impact is also in the form of floods and cyclones. So apart from these natural disasters, some cities are also prone to chemical and industrial disasters. The example which comes to our mind is Bhopal gas tragedy. So that is a point to be noted which happened in Bhopal. In addition to that, lot of man-made disasters, it could be in the form of accidents, whatever it might be. So as a whole, if you just look on, India is a mixed and it is also a country which is disaster prone, which we have to accept. Now first disaster, let us look on to the earthquake. The earthquake is caused by the disruption of the tectonic plates and there happens a sudden dislocation. Sudden dislocation means it is a damage or a relocation or falling down of the material within the earth's outer layer or the crust. So there is a disturbance at the base. As a result, the material falls down. It means that the foundation is disturbed. Earthquake is a tremor. Tremor means a violent shock, a shiver, a strong shiver. That is the meaning of tremor. It is a violent tremor in the earth's crust reflecting at the surface. It sends a series of shock waves. So you know that when you throw a pebble in water, so it provides circular waves going around in the pond or a lake if you throw a pebble or a stone. Similar way, the earthquake sends a series of shock waves in all the directions from its place of origin. So whatever the material at the surrounding it falls down, the falling of one material might fall on the other and it can create a continuous chain of damage. So that is the problem with earthquake. Now if you just look on to the effects, you can see that picture. There is a sudden dislocation on the earth crust. All the buildings have fallen down, which in turn had got a sequential and continuous effect over the other buildings. Another thing is subsidence. The land goes inside. it comes like an inverted funnel. Liquefaction, in the sense, it is something like a landslide or a disturbance. It freely flows down. So the material which has fallen down, which falls on the other thing and continuously rampages. Ultimately, it creates a damage to humans, not only humans, to the plants, animals, whatever the surrounding material. This is the problem with the earthquake. Now, coming to the point, we will straight away go to the management. What is the mitigation measures? Mitigation measures means how you are going to act to the earthquake. How you can create a remedial measure to handle the earthquake. That is the question. First thing, earthquakes create a major impact on the building structures. So initially you have to look onto the building structures, its architecture and design. Whether quality materials are used for the construction of the building or not. So that should be considered in priority, and it is being exclusively studied earthquake resistant buildings in civil engineering. So that is a growing area to mitigate the earthquake event. Another thing, if you want to construct the earthquake resistant buildings, very particularly such type of architecture has to be created at the earthquake prone zones. These days earthquake prone zones are mapped through advanced thing, and you have to vigilantly monitor whether those buildings are kept in a properly designed and constructed in a proper material, whether the quality of materials is proper, so that even if an earthquake happens, the damage should be at minimal or low. That is the main idea of looking into the architecture of the building or constructing a building which is earthquake resistant at the earthquake prone zone. Another thing, whenever in civil engineering people see that the building will have a high load bearing capacity, so it should in a position to withstand the stress. So the materials which can withstand the stress, so such architectural process or mechanisms should be infused in the construction of the building. Another thing is seismically safe construction materials. Of course, now it is being integrated in postgraduate and undergraduate civil engineering and many of the architectural programs about the disaster management or earthquake resistant buildings. They can simulate it. Now people are trying to infuse nano materials, earthquake resistant buildings and structural components, and that is being academically infused to the engineers so that they can construct better buildings and better what to say that bridges. Now another hand is, if earthquake is going to happen or it has happened, the hospitals or other things should have emergency preparedness. If a person is coming with a bleeding or injury, so the casualties might be more. So the rescue team has to have a prior training, and they should be in a position to take the people and rescue the people, put them in a hospital to minimize the casualty. In fact, a recent research is quite interesting. People are trying to keep an electrical antenna-like structure in cockroaches so that the cockroaches could be able to find the person who are under the debris of a building. That is a hypothetical research being proposed and it is going on. So because cockroaches could be able to sense with their antennae and move on. There is an additional information, but still how we can rescue them, what sort of training could be given. So whenever earthquake or other thing comes, only the firefighting personnel come into picture, so they should be adequately trained. Another thing is, if it is a seismic zone, so construction of industries or schools or hospitals or educational area, those should be evacuated to the safety zones. Additional thing is, we have to keep the military personnel because already they have been trained, and telecommunication and rescue operation should be in full force so that you can try to restore the normalcy, minimize the fear of earthquake, and support the fellow human beings. Next thing, we will just go to the overall disaster management at the end. We will just look on to the four major disasters We will understand the disasters, then we will just go on. What do you mean by flood? We have just discussed this flood. If the geomorphic equilibrium of the earth is being disturbed, you recall back we have discussed about the Chennai floods. So it is an overflow or expanse of water. It submerges the land, very particularly not only on the buildings or the land or the houses, it submerges the agricultural land where the crop production is put into trouble. So rivers, streams overflow, they break the bund, they break the embankment, or it can be due to a ruptured dam, or it could be a rapid ice melting on the mountains. Excessive rains can cause a huge flow of water with full force that can create floods. As a result, the villages surrounding the area, very particularly the river or other thing, they get inundated. So what happens is the rivers change their course during the floods. They don't follow a pathway. They want to expel the force. As a result, you find a lot of top fertile soil containing the well processed bioavailable nutrients are lost and left to the sea. Another thing, from the mountain side, lot of valuable materials, silty materials are also being cleared. When they burst their banks, they engulf the people's farms. In the sense, their agricultural land or the crops are drowned in the river swell. Another thing, agricultural lands, crop lands, all these things, so it lead to the loss of the crops, cattle, farmers, and the whole property and lives of the community who are living near the flood prone zone or the flooded area. And it is very clear and very stunning report saying that every year 75 lakh hectares of land is affected and 1600 people are their lives are lost. Of course, lives are lost, their property is lost, home is gone, and it is really a serious issue to be noted. And it creates a damage to crops, houses, and public utilities. So, restoring the normalcy after the flood, unless the flood water recedes, people cannot enter to restore the poles or telecommunication towers or other thing. This is the biggest and the crucial issue to bring back to the normalcy. So ultimately what happens is the people get relocated, lot of civic amenities gets disturbed, the drinking water gets disturbed. So there are chances of this water mixing with the sewage, and the water quality also gets deteriorated, and the risk of epidemics, very particularly waterborne epidemics like diarrhea, dysentery, cholera can happen due to effects, due to the floods. And another important thing, cyclone by and large happens with the marine environment. Floods, it can related with the rivers. Cyclone could be referred with the marine environment. Both are more or less the impact is created with water only. And this cyclone is taken from a Greek word called cyclos. It means that coils of snake. You find the picture, you find the cyclone to be surrounding. It looks as if two coils of snakes are surrounded and they are trying to twine and entwine and untwine and they are falling it. So this is caused by the atmospheric disturbances around a low pressure area, and it is caused by a destructive air, in the sense at the top layer clockwise direction of the air, at the bottom layer it is in an anti-clockwise. So the force is more there, washing away the water, hitting the coastal region with full force. So that is a point to be noted with the cyclone. When we just look onto the cyclone, you have to understand the process where the air circulates inward in an anti-clockwise direction, opposite direction in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. So it is something like twisting the thread or a rope with full pressure from the ocean, because the pressure from the ocean is more towards the land. And the tropical storms in the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, they appear like a coiled serpents in the sea, as if two snakes have been coiled together and it is looking alike. This is what the basic understanding of our cyclone. And it is needless to what to say that detail over it, but it is quickly to look on to the whole thing. Cyclones are characterized by their devastating potential. They create a huge damage to the structures, very particularly houses, lifeline infrastructure, very particularly electrical poles, and very importantly, the telecommunication towers, all the cables have been ruptured. In addition to that, it creates an impact, a problem for electricity and lifeline support systems at hospitals also. Food storage facilities, roads, bridges, crops, everything gets devastated in the sense completely gets damaged. And the fatalities in the sense people are getting because of the storm surge. The storm is coming along with the muddy water, so the people could not able to swim in that environment, and because of the torrential rain, flooding like anything in a fast manner completely devastate the home, life, property, and it leads to more casualties. And the cyclones have been characterized or differentiated based on the place where they origin. So the equatorial region is the center, above which we call it as tropical Cancer, Tropic of Cancer, and below that we call it as Tropic of Capricorn. So if the cyclones develop in the regions between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, we call it as a tropical cyclone. This is the general name given for a cyclone. And if it is coming from China Sea and Pacific Ocean, it is called as typhoons. Hurricanes, when they come from the Caribbean Sea and Atlantic Ocean. In fact, people say that hurricane lamb, which can withstand even the pressure of the wind, they doesn't get doused. And when it comes from Guinea Islands of West Africa and southern USA, they are called as tornadoes. And if they come from Australia, they are called as willy willies. If it comes from Indian Ocean, it is called as tropical cyclones. And if you just look on to the states which are more affected, the coastal states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, particularly Vishakhapatnam, Odisha, and Bay of Bengal. So if you just look on, these are the major zones which are impacted by cyclones, and the place from it originates. They just give the name. In fact, recently we have experienced Nisarga cyclone which came and impacted. Now, if you just look on to the characteristics of these cyclones, their diameter, I told you it is something like a cyclical thing. Two serpents coiled together. Their diameter is 50 to 320 kilometer the size. Imagine 320 kilometer size is a large area. So there, that is the reason the pressure comes with full force. It attacks the land, thousands kilometers, square kilometers of ocean surface, and the lower atmosphere is the complete pressure is being built up, and they dominate over the land. They are hitting at a speed of 320 kilometer. Probably this could be explained with a simple example. You have all heard about a Rajdhani train. The Rajdhani train, the maximum speed is 220 kilometer per hour. Here it is something like more of a one and a half size of a Rajdhani train speed, and it is coming and attacking the land. So imagine the impact. Literally, the boats will flew off from the ocean, even if they are tied. So the fisherman colony will be affected. So it creates a severe rampaging effect. Now let us look on to the mitigation measures. So now forecast systems are there. They give you through many of the commercial websites like Google or other thing. Lot of weathercasting events are happening. So they forecast the fishermen should they advise the fishermen they should not go to the sea or quickly return from the sea for fishing. And any river flooding areas they are evacuated, and every village they give an announcement through the social media and remove the people, locate them temporarily to the safe places. And of course, During the dry period, they also keep the check dams and reservoirs well constructed, and it will be strengthened to hold the water. And wetlands are the good effective barriers of floods, but unfortunately wetlands are at the threat because of the anthropogenic activities, particularly because of the pollution. So if wetlands could be restored, they can act as a best barrier for floods. They can hold the water and keep the environment intact without inundating. Another thing is river networking is also proposed to be a solution, so that you can connect the rivers and you can divert the flow of water to the states or the regions where they require water. And they are trying to establish the disaster management camps. There is a national disaster management agency is available, which functions to establish the disaster management camps at the taluk levels or the district levels, wherever there is a area being marked as a disaster prone or whatever it might be. And generally they give an advice to the fishermen not to venture into the sea, and they establish emergency teams at hospitals. So in event of any accident has happened, how the people life, how they can treat it medically to restore their life. So such rescue camps are also being established as a mitigatory measure of flood or cyclone. Now the next important thing is a landslide. Why a landslide is happening? Slide means coming down. When you are sliding down means you are coming or falling down from a higher end to a lower end, or from a higher region to a lower region you come down. That is called as slide. Landslide means the whole land mass is sliding down. Normally this landslide is broadly found in hilly areas or in the roads that are being constructed in the hilly regions. So the slope, that is the direct fall down, or a sudden or a gradual change, as a result the composition, vegetation, structure gets disturbed and they fall down. The land mass gets loosened, so from a higher elevation it comes down to the lower region or other thing. So the changes could be due to changes in the climate, weathering, natural weathering caused by rain, by heavy torrential rain, because of the land use pattern, excess cultivation pattern, where the topsoil gets loosened down, or it may be due to an earthquake. So these are the prime factors responsible for a landslide, and major landslides are witnessed in the mountainous region, particularly the roads when the transport is happening. Now, what are the causes for the landslide? Of course, again, it is based on natural and anthropogenic for our easy understanding. First thing, when the rainwater infiltration happens at a saturation level, it loosens the soil, or a snow melting or a glaciers melting happen at the mountains. It might lead to a condition called avalanche. Or the groundwater is rising and the pore water pressure sometimes disturbs the basic substratum of the soil. As a result, the land mass can slide down. In fact, the hydrostatic pressure happens in an area where it leads to cracks and fissures. Those fractured soil, which in addition due to the natural clearance of the forest, can aggravate the landslide. Maybe the vegetative structure is not properly arranged, the nutrients are not proper, the soil structure is also loose, very particularly after a forest fire or a wildfire in the forest. So that could can also create an impact to have a landslide. Another thing, whenever the rivers flow in the mountainous region, they also make the environment soft. The rocky environment becomes soft. That also loosens the area. The rocks can tumble down. Another thing, natural weathering process. In the sense, the rocks are withering. It means that it is being broken into small pieces, finally converted into a soil. This can happen naturally because of the impact of the sunlight or because of the heating or cooling process by the water and sunlight or general mineral dissolution can lead to physical and chemical weathering. The soil can get loosened down and it can slide it down. And the major issue is earthquake. In fact, there may be a unstable slope, and if soil liquefaction occurs, in the sense if the soil becomes liquid in nature, weaker, it slides down. So that eventually creates an impact. Another thing is volcanic eruptions, which happens in the mountainous side. So these are some of the natural causes of landslides. Of course, needless to mention, but we can quickly have a revise over the man-made causes. Deforestation, cutting of trees. So literally you are exposing the ground to the sunlight, aggravating the process of withering, and you are changing the course of water flow. Topsoil is being eroded, and literally you are creating or paving a way for earthquake. And also the cultivation or construction of buildings, the vibration caused due to the machinery or the traffic, deep borewelling, all these things, blasting in the event of extracting the minerals from the earth's surface. Whenever they go for a strip mining, landslides are happening in a frequent manner. Another thing is, in the event of changing the landscape, so they are defacing the landscape in the event of construction in the hilly regions or paving a road, that can create some sort of impact over the earth, and that can slide down where the land mass gets loosened and falls down along with the water force. Very particularly shallow soils where the soils can easily sink down. So whenever they remove the vegetation, so what happens is it exposes the bedrock. Automatically when it is exposed or other thing, whenever they clear that environment, the rocks fall down. And agricultural activities, particularly the logging activities, cutting of trees for commercial timber, urbanization, constructing buildings can change the amount of water infiltrating in the soil. So the soil gets logically compacted, tightened, and it can lose its moisture, can just withered off and fall down. So that is also a cause for a landslide. Now the question comes how we can mitigate or remediate, how we can stop it. So the simple thing is physically you can control the landslides if the exposure of the population facilities to create an impact over the area, defacing that area if it is minimized, that could by and large control the landslide. Another thing is lot of developmental programs you have to involve where if the existing topography has to be maintained. The exploitation of natural resources should be minimized or it should be balanced so that the pressure on the ground should not be more. So the balance load on the ground should not be permitted. That is what we are saying. So exploitation of the natural resources, particularly mining minerals, this creates a problem with landslides. In most of the mountainous regions, the drainage area is being blocked. So that creates a pressure, loosens the bedrock, and the landslide happens. So the drainage has to be cleared. It could be a natural drainage. And erosion control measures in the form of constructing natural plant growth, bamboo check dams, terracing it properly with the jute or coir netting, and rockfall control measures where you can go for a grass plantation and keeping a masonry wall, vegetated dry masonry wall, retaining the wall, maintaining it so that it can prevent the landslide. And very importantly, deforestation activities should be curbed, and afforestation activity should be improved in the landslide or landslide prone region or mapped region so that the landslides could be controlled. Now, if you just look on, we looked on to the four disasters, how we can manage them. If you just look onto your overall perspective of disaster management, it involves three things. Reduce it, avoid, try to avoid the hazard as best as possible so that the potential losses could be minimized. Immediate, prompt, and appropriate action, appropriate preparedness is required, and assistance to the victims wherever, whenever necessary. So it means that enormous amount of preparation and practice and training is required so that we can have a quick, rapid, and a durable recovery so that the normalcy could be restored in a better way. If you just look onto the disaster management cycle, it involves pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster. The pre-disaster involves the preparation. It is a norm whenever you just look on, it is an emergency phase happens during the disaster. So it is in a normal phase in the sense you have to prepare yourself in the sense emergency, whatever required, the people have to be prepared. And what are the plans that are there applied for the rescue and relief during the disaster? The people should be made aware of it. The emergency personnel should be ready in act. Hospitals should be made ready to handle the situation. That involves the preparatory phase. Disaster happens. During the disaster, because it's a natural disaster, we cannot have a big control over it. However, you can act appropriately and sensibly where you can rescue or remove them from the disaster prone zones, or the disaster has happened, we can just remove the victims. Next comes the post disaster. Of course, during disaster, you should give them proper medical treatment and other thing. A person has lost his land or a property. So how he can be rehabilitated? What land could be given to him? What insurance schemes could be applied for him? What money compensation could be given to him to reconstruct his own property and lives? This happens in the case of farmers. And how you can integrate the national disaster management policy. What are the mitigatory measures you can happen so that the post disaster helps in the quick recovery of the people? So this is what the disaster management cycle, which is quite important, and this is what been applied for the whatever the major disasters we face upon, like floods or cyclones, earthquakes, or in the form of landslides. Now, one example we can have during cyclone. So, cyclone normally happens between May, June, or July. So, before the disaster, January to April, well before, now the meteorological department is adequately equipped. They can forecast and inform us. This is the issue. A cyclone has formed, a low depression area is noticed in the Bay of Bengal or Indian Ocean, whatever it might be. Accordingly, based on the forecast being set by the meteorological department, we can prepare, make the people to evacuate well before the cyclone hits. During May or June or July, whatever it might be, during the disaster phase, that is the actual time period. So we have to monitor, more or less we have saved the lives of the people. There might be a few property damage which we are helpless, very particularly fishermen property, their boats or other thing could be disturbed, colonies could be disturbed, they may not have the job during the time. So during that time they can be given some sort of other financial assistance so that they can come out of the hardship. After the disaster is over, how best we can rescue them, give them a relief, make them to stay in some sort of schools or colleges or other thing, keep them in a safe shelter. We can give them all the best sanitary facilities, food, drinking water, clean drinking water, minimize the waterborne diseases or vector-borne diseases, make them to rehabilitate and reconstruct their life. We can give fiber boats or a thing. Of course, government is already implementing it. Their life is restored back so that their normalcy is being started. They resume to the work after June or October. So that is a crucial phase. where it has to be done in a fast manner. So if you just look on, it could be a pre-disaster, disaster and a disaster cycle. So that way we can function for managing a cyclone. Now coming to the elements at risk. In any disaster, these are the major elements. First thing, people, human life. Second thing, livestock, cattle, rural housing stock. It could be a chicken or whatever it might be, hen, fowl or whatever it might be. Another thing, houses are vulnerable. In the sense their buildings can be shook because of an earthquake, or it could be rampaged by a flood or a cyclone. The crops can get damaged, trees can get uprooted, so their movement of the people could be arrested. Telephone and electric poles can fall down, it can lead to leakage of electricity, or our communication mechanisms may be hampered. In addition to that, boats, working implements, very particularly oars or other thing, boats get totally damaged during the cyclone. In addition to that, personal property, the land, the house may get devastated or broken down during a landslide or a earthquake. So electricity, water, food supplies, these are the major essential constituents for a ease life, a comfortable life. Finally, the infrastructure support, the common amenities, the government office or any other thing, general civil amenities, the park or a pathway or a connecting highway, road, all the things could be damaged. So these elements should be continuously monitored so that the risk could be minimized or managed. Now coming to the disaster response, if a disaster is going to happen, how we can respond with our awareness. First thing, a warning is given, of course. National Disaster Management Act as well as the agency gives enough warning through Indian Meteorological Department. So it maps the different zones. Then they are giving a second level of warning to evacuate the people, keep them in a safe shelter. And when the disaster happens, the team personnel, emergency personnel, comes into activity and try to search the victims, rescue them, put them into a safe shelter. Then a proper financial or economical assessment is being carried out, keeping very many parameters in hand. They just look on how to assess the situation. So how best we can quickly relieve them from the disaster, reconstruct the whole process, rehabilitate them, rejuvenate them and put them to work. So what is the emergency relief operations could be conducted? What is the logistics and supply? On an average, a person consumes minimum 3 to 4 liters of water. If a group of 100 people are there, we require minimum 600 liters of water. How that water could be managed? Can we keep a tractor of water? That way a drinking water. And another thing is, what is the sanitary facility we can offer them? How much amount of food is required? Whether they require any electricity, a candle light, whether they require any dress. So of course, lot of support measures are given by the public. And the communication and information at the taluk level, village level, it will be informed. The village head will be informed, so they can safely bring the cattle back, or they can safely come out of their house, shelter them in the places allotted by the government. So these are some of the disaster response activities you look on. In addition to that, whenever the survivor, how to cope him up, what sort of psychological, physical or biological support could be given to restore his welfare, to restore his health, security, how best the people could be safeguarded, and coordination of the thing, and how best you can expedite, fasten the rehabilitation and reconstruction. All these things is been emergency and organized coordination, EOC, that could also happen. These are the some of the disaster response activities where people could be managed, where our government or other people are preparing ourselves to manage a disaster, and how best you can respond to a disaster. To summarize the whole thing, India is a disaster prone country. Disaster means a natural catastrophe. Disaster can be a man made or a natural. So we just looked on to the natural disasters because these are the disasters frequently occurring in India. India is a disaster prone country because the vulnerability of the land and the area to earthquake, landslide or cyclones or floods are more. Reason behind is the arrangement of the topography. For example, floods and cyclones are more, and drought is also found to be more. We have got three oceans. You could find an enormous amount of pressure output from the oceans to the land, and very particularly landslides happen in the mountainous region. Floods happens by and large due to marine water as well as to the river. Earthquake happens because of the pressure impinged upon to the earth, and earthquake is measured in Richter scale. So 5.8 Richter scale, that is the magnitude we try to express. To manage the disaster, we have got a proper framework. So the disaster management cycle consists of a pre-disaster, before happening a disaster, how we can prepare, how we can give an early warning signal, how we can forecast, how we can keep the fishermen community safe into the shore, what are the shelters you have to prepare during disaster, how you can balance it during the disaster, how we can rescue or relieve them and put them into a shelter, what sort of sanitary facilities, food should be given to the public, and post disaster, how we can quickly relieve them from the disaster shock, how we can reconstruct their building, what assessment could be made, what coordination should be made. So what are the elements at risk that should be happening before the disaster? Then post-disaster rehabilitation, reconstructing their life and making their life restoring to the normalcy. That is what the disaster management cycle speaks upon. Uh, Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am Jay Kumar, Assistant Professor in Environmental Science at Geetham University, Bengaluru campus. In today's lecture, we are going to look on to about the environmental awareness and with a case study about the CNG vehicles available at Delhi. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Balaji of JNU and DTH Swayamprabha, MHRD, New Delhi, for permitting me to deliver this lecture. So in today's presentation, we are going to look on to the public awareness about the environment and how the public awareness has led to the CNG vehicles movement in Delhi. That is what we are going to discuss upon. Coming to the environmental awareness. Before awareness, we should know about the ignorance. Many people are not understanding the environment or their surrounding. They don't change their attitude or behavior. They just like that spill the waste or spill spitting or any other thing towards the environment, which creates a lot of trouble. If they are aware of it, if they are very more sensible, they will not do any acts which are more human centric. Eco-centric acts are required. So in nutshell, environmental ignorance have to be removed, awareness has to be created. So today, environmental studies is made as a compulsory course, ability enhancement course by MHRD, and it is prescribed from LKG onwards till the undergraduation level. So it is made as a compulsory course. So the students are getting educated, having an awareness. In fact, the whole presentation of this course is to create environmental awareness. And also it is being created to the public through mass media. In fact, the general sanitation facilities, how people should be keep aware during the pandemics or other thing, it is all related with the environment. And of course, the planners, decision makers, and the leaders are also too aware of this environmental awareness, and government is implementing a lot of plans. A simple example is Swachh Bharat. So to keep your surrounding clean, if you keep your surrounding clean, you can be free from the disease. A simplest concept. It is not like that putting the dirt, making it as a solid waste management, and it should be handled by the municipality or corporation. Every citizen is an environmental man. He should take up the responsibility of his own surrounding, clean it, and clear it. So that has been implemented from the school level to the students, to the corporate people through mass media, planners, decision makers, and other things. And lot of non-governmental organizations are also supporting, very particularly Center for Science and Development, Bombay Natural History Society. In addition to that, there are bird centers, government of institutions like Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History, which conserves birds. SACON, which is located at Coimbatore, Anaikatti. So enormous efforts have been taken to conserve the environment and biodiversity. It all comes through awareness. Let us see a small case study with the CNG vehicles operated at Delhi. CNG means compressed natural gas. Well, Delhi is one of the top 10 most polluted cities of the world. Very heartening to note. And it is the third most populated city of India, and it is the capital. 13.8 million inhabitants are people are present over the 1483 square kilometer. So you can just look on the population pressure. Most of our governmental organizations centrally constituted there and administer the whole nation. Parliament is located. So that way, Delhi is the capital prime attraction area. Logically, if more people are there, they should have a comfortable transport. So everybody owns their personal transport in the form of a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, or depend on the public transport. So you could find a good number of increase in the vehicular population. When population of vehicles increase, correspondingly you find the air pollutants are also increasing. Somewhere around more than 13 what to say the 1300 1300 tons of air pollutants are emitted, and in 1992 it was 26 lakh vehicles, and today you find 109.86 lakh vehicles in the year 2018, and it has grown up to 110 lakhs in 2019. So this is what the basic background information about the transportation system in Delhi. You find roads, you find auto rickshaws, you find metro railways, local trains, flights. So lot of vehicular population are pouring into Delhi. Very particularly when people analyzed it, the Central Pollution Control Board was stunned to notice that high amounts of carbon oxide, very particularly carbon monoxide, oxides of nitrogen, are very high during the traffic intersections because it connects Punjab, Rajasthan, Gurgaon, all these things are there, Uttar Pradesh. So everything is there. When they checked the oxides of sulfur to an extent with the permissible limit, but the suspended particulate matter usually exceeded the permissible limit, and very particularly you find lot of dust emissions from the power plants and other industries. So this is again a point to be noted. So immediately noticing the seriousness of the situation, the Supreme Court of India, the highest authentic policy making body or Supreme Court of India, clearly ordered the government stating that you have to improve the air quality. So you have to augment the public transport to 10,000 buses, convert every them taxis or auto rickshaws to change their fuel, and it gave some time convert them into CNG because it emits less amount of pollutants. So all the 1919 auto rickshaws will have to be converted to 2000 by having clean fuels because they are all running in petrol or diesel. So the whole system has to be changed into a gas converter. So new vehicles with clean fuel technology by 31st March 2000, every vehicle has to be changed. That was the Supreme Court directive. So buses with the age of more than 8 years, don't allow them to fly, and make them converted into compressed natural gas, or they have to run on the clean fuels. That was the directive given. So the entire city bus fleet got changed into a single fuel mode very particularly of CNG. And you have to provide adequate gas stations to refill. So everything was established. So the Gas Authority of India expedited the process and they gave 9 to 80 CNG outlets all over the city to give the fuel in time and in an adequate manner. So as a result, when you just compare with the diesel bus, the percentage reduction with the CNG bus is somewhere around 56% in carbon monoxide reduction. More or less 80% reduction in particulates, very particularly suspended particulate. This research clearly indicated that CNG bus could be operated. And another advantages being noted down is CNG is less running cost. It gives the vehicle a longer service life, lower maintenance costs, and it reduces the demand for finite petroleum supply. And you could able to reduce the carbon monoxide emission by over 90%, and a drastic reduction of hydrocarbons were also noticed. So these are some of the advantages of the usage of the CNG vehicles. Another thing is the fuel consumption and engine efficiency are improved. So the dry gaseous fuel not only dilute the lubricating oil, it saves the oil filters. So whenever they wanted to change the engine oil, definitely they have to change the oil filter or the oil charger. So the longevity of the filter could be balanced. So there happens a reduction in the maintenance cost of the whole vehicles. Reduction in the engine noise levels, that is quite interesting, so that they could curb the noise pollution, and less octane number, so less emission of hydrocarbons, and reduction in the air toxic emission impact by around 90% was noticed by subsequent studies conducted by the Central Pollution Control Board. And they found that over a year, over a decade or other thing, the pollutant concentrations are also being decreased, and the carbon emissions also decreased by 50%. The problem ahead is only they could keep only 50 to 60% of the vehicles to get converted into CNG. The other vehicles have to be converted so that the environment could be clean. So this is a best standing example. So we can opt for cleaner gases to use in a public transport to reduce the air polluted concentration. So this is being encouraged at the city level. So it is very clear, if public awareness could be instilled through media to the children, to the decision makers, or to the public along with the NGO organizations, automatically the awareness may create, and every citizen will be made responsible for a human, not a human centric environment, on an eco-centric environment. And this is being explained by the CNG vehicles. Of course, CNG vehicles are now getting more popularized, and still many vehicles are running in CNG. A comparatively drastic reduction in the air pollutants is noticed. So if awareness could be instilled at all possible environmental dimensions, definitely we can make our nation a green nation, improve our nation, become a well responsible citizen, and we can fight whatever the pandemic that comes in a responsible way, keep our nation and the environment safe, and we will be getting uplifted in the whole globe. That is what the take home message. Thank you.